Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our third Demystifying the DOJ presentation of 2024. Before we begin, I would like to let you know that Spanish language interpretation is available for this presentation. You may access this feature by clicking on the interpretation button or the world icon at the bottom of your screen and choosing the language you would like to hear this presentation in. You can also add closed captioning by clicking Show Caption on the bottom ribbon of your screen. My name is Efrain Boteo Cisneros, and I'm a Community Outreach Manager with the Office of Community Awareness, Response, and Engagement, also known as CARE. One of our goals at CARE is to develop knowledge and awareness amongst the public and community organizations of DOJ's mission and actions on behalf of the people of California. This Demystifying the DOJ presentation series aims to do just that. These webinars are great opportunities for you to learn directly from DOJ staff and be able to ask questions regarding the work of DOJ's various bureaus, sections, and divisions. I will be moderating today's presentation, which we hope will provide some insight about the work of the Racial Justice Bureau, also known as RJB at the California Department of Justice. Today, we will cover what RJB is, what RJB does, and how you can help RJB. After the presentation, we will spend some time answering some of your questions. My colleague Lara will be adding a brief agenda in the chat for your reference. In just a bit, you will hear from three knowledgeable Racial Justice Bureau experts: Supervising Deputy Attorney General Joel Marrero, Supervising Deputy Attorney General Marissa Maloof, and Deputy Attorney General Dalen Thrift Viveros. There will be time for Q&A after the presentation. Please share your questions in the Q&A box on your screen throughout the presentation so that we can try our best to answer them. Please specify if you have a question for a specific presenter. If you shared questions in our registration form, they have been sent out to our presenters, and we will try our best to address some of them during the presentation. We will also try to answer some of those during our Q&A. Thank you for sending them our way ahead of time. And lastly, if you are joining us today as a reporter or affiliated with press, please direct your questions to agpressoffice@doj.ca.gov. Now, I'll turn it over to our presenters. Racial Justice Bureau, please take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Efrain. My name is Joel Marrero, and I'm a Supervising Deputy Attorney General in the Civil Rights Enforcement Section of the California Department of Justice. I am one of two Supervising Deputy Attorney Generals overseeing the Racial Justice Bureau. Here with me today to share more of the Racial Justice Bureau's work is my co-lead Supervising Deputy Attorney General Marissa Maloof and my colleague Deputy Attorney General Dalen Thrift Viveros. I would like to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Thank you very much, Joel and Efrain, and thank you everyone for joining us. As Joel said, my name is Marissa Maloof, and I am a Supervising Deputy Attorney General in the Civil Rights Enforcement Section, overseeing the Racial Justice Bureau. I'm very excited to tell you more about our work today. I will hand it off to Dalen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Dalen Thrift Viveros. I'm a Deputy Attorney General in the Civil Rights Enforcement Section in Los Angeles, and I'm a liaison for the Racial Justice Bureau.
Thank you, Marissa and Dalen. The Racial Justice Bureau, or RJB as it is warmly known, is one of three bureaus within the Civil Rights Enforcement Section, a subcomponent of the California Department of Justice, which is also known as the Office of the Attorney General. The Division of Public Rights is one of three divisions within the DOJ, and its mission is to safeguard the state's environment, land, and natural resources, and to prevent fraudulent business practices and protect consumers, and to protect the civil rights of all Californians. There are 12 sections within the Public Rights Division, a few of which can be seen on this chart. As you can see, the PRD encompasses sections within the DOJ that work on a host of critical issues impacting Californians, including environmental, labor, and consumer issues. The Racial Justice Bureau is housed within the Civil Rights Enforcement Section, also known as CRESS. I'll note that the Police Practices section was previously under the purview of CRESS, but has been separated recently into its own section. However, the Racial Justice Bureau will continue its work on law enforcement issues that implicate race or racial bias, as well as national origin and immigration. Attorney General Bonta is committed to the work of the Racial Justice Bureau. California is home to communities of diverse backgrounds, and some of which experience various forms of discrimination. The Department of Justice's work in the areas of racial justice and civil rights is critical to ensuring that all Californians live, work, and prosper without the fear or threat of discrimination. Today's presentation will touch on the following subjects: what is the Racial Justice Bureau? What does the Racial Justice Bureau do? How you can help, and we'll have time for Q&A. So what does the Racial Justice Bureau do? The Racial Justice Bureau was created in May 2021 by Attorney General Bonta to increase our office's focus on racial and societal issues across the DOJ. Across the DOJ's civil rights work and support new and ongoing efforts to protect all Californians. RJB addresses unlawful race, color, and national origin-based discrimination in a variety of areas, including voting rights, immigration, law enforcement, housing, education, and hate crimes. RJB advances racial justice through investigations. Our office's authority to conduct investigations is found in Government Code 11180. This law allows our offices to make investigations and prosecute actions concerning A, all matters relating to the business activities and subjects under the jurisdiction of the department, B, violations of any law or rule or order of the department, and C, such other matters as may be provided by law. Our section also litigates. This is distinct. I want to note that our ability to litigate is derived from Government Code 11180, so we can bring suit against private actors or public actors within the state of California. Our authority, though, to litigate against the federal government relies on different concepts that I won't go into much detail today. We also have the ability to, and have indeed issued amicus briefs, comment letters. These comment letters include letters to federal agencies or regulators who have announced that they're considering a regulation or rule. In a comment letter, we would explain to that agency the importance or the implication of that rule on California. We also issue policy and guidance. And lastly, we issue public reports and other publications. So what does the RJB do? In terms of laws enforced, we enforce federal laws. These include the US Constitution, including the 1st, 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendments, federal statutes, such as the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Equal Credit and Opportunity Act, Title 6 and 7 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We also enforce California laws, such as the California Constitution, and important civil rights laws, such as the Unruh Civil Rights Act, the Tom Bain Civil Rights Act, the Fair Employment and Housing Act, the Racial Justice Act, the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, California Voting Rights Act, and the California Education Code, as well as the California Government Code. In terms of investigations, although racial justice work is diffused throughout the civil rights enforcement section, meaning it isn't just RJB that's working on racial justice issues, RJB creates a space within the civil rights enforcement section to strategize, analyze, and develop ideas that advance racial justice. RJB collaborates with other bureaus within CRUST, such as the Bureau of Children's Justice and the Disability Rights Bureau, but also with other sections of the office, including the Workers' Rights and Fair Labor section, Consumer Protection, Healthcare Rights and Access, Land Use, and Antitrust. The Attorney General has broad authority to investigate violations of California law. Again, that is derived under Government Code 11180. RJB's investigations and our litigation as well focus on systemic issues and pattern practices of discrimination. Our investigations, it is important to know our investigations are confidential. Some resolutions are made public when filed in court or when an agreement is reached to resolve the investigation. This confidentiality restriction is derived from Government Code 11180, which again gives our office broad authority to investigate and litigate violations of law, but with it also impose an important confidentiality restriction, meaning again that we cannot share information about a pending or an active investigation with the public. We also have a general limitation against investigating or litigating against a state agency, given our office's attorney-client relationship with state agencies. In terms of investigations, so how do we conduct investigations? We review publicly available information. This could include news articles, social media, videos of and documents for public meetings. Once we initiate a formal investigation, we can issue subpoenas. And these are subpoenas for documents such as emails, written policies, and data. We can also interview witnesses. This can include interviewing witnesses under oath, so oral examinations, and conduct in-person site visits. We can hire experts to conduct analysis and assess the issues. One thing to note is that our office can self-initiate an investigation, but generally before we launch an investigation, we make a preliminary determination to decide if there is a basis in evidence in law to sue or investigate a target or seek relief in court. At the conclusion of the investigation, we reach confidential findings as to whether laws or regulations have been violated and assess what is needed to remedy the violations. If violations are found, next steps can include negotiating a stipulated judgment, that is an agreement filed in court with the force of law and oversight by the court, or we can file and litigate a lawsuit in court. One thing to note is that when determining an appropriate remedy, we consult with experts. However, ultimately, it is up to the Attorney General to decide whether our office has a basis in evidence in law to conclude that there has been a violation of law and what the appropriate next step would be. Today's presentation will touch on the following subject matters, including combating discrimination and bias in the private and public sectors, including policing, promoting housing justice, protecting immigrant rights, protecting voting rights, combating hate crimes and bias, and the California Reparations Task Force. In the area of combating discrimination, our office investigated 2 motels in Yreka, California, where Native Americans were allegedly denied accommodations due to tribal affiliation. In 2022, the DOJ reached agreements with hotels requiring that they issue formal apologies to the Karo tribe, submit a policy to the DOJ clearly outlining non-discriminatory reasons for the denial of accommodation, adopt a comprehensive non-discrimination statement and policy, and provide training to all employees on that policy. Earlier this year, the DOJ found that the hotels had complied with their obligations under the agreement. With respect to combating bias in policing, our office has also opened an investigation of the Torrance Police Department to identify and address potential systemic failures in the department's policies and practices, among them allegations of excessive force, racist text messages, and other discriminatory conduct. The DOJ, the City of Torrance, and the Torrance Police Department entered into a memorandum of understanding to conduct the review. The DOJ has been conducting site visits, staff interviews, and community interviews. It is important to note that the Office of the Attorney General has made no determinations at this point about the specific complaints or allegations against the Torrance Police Department. In addition, our office is tasked with implementing Assembly Bill 655, also known as the CLEAR Act, This was enacted in 2023 to address the growing problem of extremist hate group infiltration of law enforcement agencies. Among other provisions, the statute requires the full investigation of any sufficient complaint against a current peace officer alleging membership in a hate group, participation in hate group activity, or public expressions of hate in the last 7 years and since the peace officer was 18 years of age. If the subject is found to have been engaged in this misconduct, the subject may be removed from their appointment. The statute directs the Department of Justice to adopt and promulgate guidelines for the investigation and adjudication of these complaints. Accordingly, the DOJ will be issuing proposed regulations that interested parties and members of the public can comment on. We encourage all to participate in this rulemaking process. Continuing with combating bias in policing, our office also represents the Racial Identity and Profiling Act Board and assists the board with the preparation of annual reports regarding racial identity profiling data. RIPA, passed in 2015, mandates that all law enforcement agencies in the state, that's local and including the CHP, report racial identity profiling data in police encounters to the DOJ. That is data regarding police stops. This could include pedestrian stops or vehicle stops. RIPA also established an advisory board comprised of members across the community tasked with evaluating annual RIPA stop data and issuing reports reflecting its analysis and policy recommendations. Since 2017, the RIPA board has issued 7 reports. This year's report will focus on officer encounters with youth. Prior reports have analyzed race, national origin, gender, age, disability, and sexual orientation disparities in police encounters practices. With the assistance of experts and community input, the RIPA board has made recommendations relating to policing, including on pretext stops, interactions with youth, and officer trainings. This year's report will analyze and make recommendations regarding officer interactions with youth. Among other conclusions, last year's RIPA report found overall the disparity between the proportion of stops and the proportion of the residential population was greatest for multiracial and Black individuals. Black individuals were stopped 131.5% more frequently than expected given their portion of the population in California. The search rate of Black individuals was 1.66 the search rate of white individuals. Although stopped individuals perceived to be Black or Hispanic were searched at a higher rate relative to their individuals perceived to be white, officers discovered contraband or evidence during stops in which they conducted searches at a lower rate for individuals perceived to be Black or Hispanic. Officers reported no action taken for Black individuals 1.4 times as often as they did for white individuals, suggesting those stopped Black individuals were not engaged in criminal activity. Sorry, I went a little too fast there. In addition, RJB promotes housing justice. In 2023, California acted AB 1418, which prohibits local governments from developing policies or enacting ordinances that require or encourage landlords to evict tenants due to a law enforcement encounter or perform criminal background checks. In 2024, the DOJ issued guidance discussing the compounding effects that crime-free housing laws have on racial disparities in housing and the criminal justice system, and explaining a local government's obligations to cease enforcing crime-free housing policies under AB 1418, the California Fair Employment Housing Act, and the Federal Fair Housing Act. Specifically, under AB 1418, local governments cannot have policies or ordinances that require landlords to evict tenants because of an interaction with law enforcement. Include provisions in lease agreements that provide a ground for eviction because of contact with law enforcement or conduct criminal background checks. Here, I will hand it off to my colleague, Marissa Malouf.
Thank you, Joelle. And good morning again, everyone. I'm going to talk with you about a few more subject matter areas that the RJB focuses on, beginning with immigration. As California has the highest number of immigrants of any state in the nation, and these residents greatly contribute to the social fabric of our state, the Attorney General recognizes the importance of fair and humane policies impacting immigrants. And our office is committed to protecting immigrants' rights through our work both at the state and federal level. I'm going to discuss a few examples of the work that we do at the state level, with the reminder that all of these are just examples and our work goes beyond these things in many of these subject areas. To begin, we are tasked with the Immigration Detention Facilities Review. Assembly Bill 103, which was passed in 2017, mandated that DOJ review and inspect public and private immigration detention facilities in California and report out its findings. Pursuant to the Attorney General's authority under AB 103, the DOJ has conducted periodic reviews and has published 3 reports in 2019, 2021, and 2022. These reports predominantly cover the conditions of confinement, including things like medical care or other issues in immigration detention. Our office's most recent report was issued in July of 2022, and that discussed conditions in these detention centers during the COVID-19 pandemic, such as COVID mitigation efforts. And we are currently working on our next round of reviews and report. Additionally, our office implements Senate Bill 54. In 2017, California enacted the Values Act, or SB 54, which restricts local law enforcement agencies' cooperation with federal immigration authorities. Among other things, SB 54 prohibits law enforcement agencies from inquiring into an individual's immigration status, detaining an individual at the request of federal immigration authorities, transferring individuals to federal immigration enforcement authorities, except in cases involving serious criminal offenses, providing federal immigration enforcement information about a person's release date, and participating in arrests based on civil immigration warrants. First in October 2018 and later in October 2023, the DOJ issued guidance to law enforcement agencies regarding their obligations under SB 54. Additionally, under SB 54, law enforcement agencies annually produce data to the DOJ regarding the number of individuals transferred to federal immigration enforcement and the statutory basis for that transfer, which allows us to check for compliance with the statute. Additionally, in California, we have very robust protections for immigrant victims of crime. This includes requirements that law enforcement agencies sign U-Visa certifications for qualified immigrant victims of crimes who have cooperated with law enforcement in criminal investigations. These certifications are necessary for them to receive U-Visas, federal U-Visas. And these protections in California ensure that qualified victims receive these certifications within a timely manner, and thereby these protections that we have increase trust between law enforcement and immigrant communities. The California DOJ has issued several law enforcement bulletins detailing these requirements, and we most recently updated our law enforcement bulletin on April 3rd, 2024. The bulletin is entitled New and Existing State Laws Protecting Immigrant Victims of Crime, and it details updates to these U-Visa certification laws in the state. I'm now going to talk about some of our federal related work. Our office has been involved in numerous actions to promote fair and humane immigration policies and oppose inhumane policies and restrictions that would negatively impact our residents and our state. This has come in the form of litigation against the federal government, where our state, in situations where our state would face really significant harms. And it's also come in the form of advocacy in the form of amicus briefs and comment letters where we've expressed our state's interest in these federal policies. So beginning with some of our litigation efforts, and again, these are just a few examples. We've consistently defended DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. The California DOJ, along with other states and nonprofit partners, challenged the Trump administration's repeal of DACA. The Attorney General's office helped secure a landmark ruling at the U.S. Supreme Court to keep the policy in effect, protecting hundreds of thousands of dreamers across the country. We continue to support Dreamers by filing friend of the state briefs in other cases and supporting the Biden administration's efforts to fortify DACA. We also recently secured a settlement in our border wall litigation. Along with other states and nonprofit partners, the DOJ successfully argued in federal courts that the Trump administration's attempt to illegally divert funding to build the border wall violated the US Constitution. The Supreme Court halted the effect of these rulings without deciding the merits. The California DOJ reached a settlement with the Biden administration to remediate some of the environmental harms of border wall construction in California, including a $25 million acquisition of a crucial parcel of land for habitat preservation. Our office has also consistently done work to protect minors in immigration detention. Most recently, on December 4th, 2023, we led a multi-state coalition of 19 attorneys general in filing a comment letter in response to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Unaccompanied Children Program Foundational Proposed Rule. The letter supported several elements of this proposed rule, but expressed concerns with provisions that would permit the placement of unaccompanied children in unlicensed facilities, and it urged HHS to amend the rule to require that all facilities housing unaccompanied children be state licensed, including both standard programs and emergency and influx facilities. This comment letter is part of our office's long-running work to protect minors in immigration detention, which included a lawsuit against the Trump administration regarding Trump-era regulations that would worsen these conditions for youth. Additionally, as noted, we have submitted and been a part of numerous amicus briefs and comment letters regarding federal immigration policies. In March of 2023, the Attorney General led a coalition of 12 attorneys general in a comment letter urging the federal government to ensure and maintain a robust access to asylum. And this was in response to federal regulations that would make it more difficult for individuals to obtain asylum. We've also supported the Central American Minors Program through an amicus brief. That was in October of 2023. And we joined an amicus brief with several other attorneys general in a challenge by the state of Texas and 14 other states against the Central American Minors Program, referred to as the CAM program. This CAM program was created in response to an increase in life-threatening border crossings by children from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, and promotes family unity and safe crossings. We also supported the Biden administration's rescission of the Remain in Mexico or Migrant Protection Protocols policy. That was in March of 2022. We joined a coalition of 18 attorneys general in an amicus brief before the U.S. Supreme Court in support of President Biden's efforts to rescind this harmful policy. And to overturn an erroneous Fifth Circuit decision that was leaving the migrant protection protocols or the Remain in Mexico policy in place. Under that former policy, asylum seekers were forced to remain in Mexico during the pendency of their asylum cases and faced hurdles to pursuing their claims, as well as dangerous conditions. These included, and some of their issues included lack of access to counsel. And finally, we've supported humanitarian parole programs. And most recently, in August of 2024, the Attorney General joined a multi-state coalition of 18 attorneys general in an amicus brief before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in a lawsuit brought by the state of Texas. This amicus brief supported President Biden's parole program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. And similar to the CAM program, this program mitigates the number of unlawful and dangerous crossings and promotes family unity. Moving on from immigration, I'm now going to talk a little bit about our office's work to protect the right to vote. Of course, this work only gains importance in advance of the election. So in 2020, our office joined a lawsuit brought by the state of Pennsylvania and other states against the U.S. Postal Service. The lawsuit challenged USPS operational and policy changes that prohibited late or extra trips by USPS workers. And required carriers to adhere rigidly to start and stop times, regardless of whether all mail for their route had had arrived or been delivered, and limited the use of overtime. In addition to resulting in mail delays, which we all may remember back in 2020, these changes came at a time when many states, including California, had just broadly expanded mail-in voting, particularly in light of COVID-19, and it prompted fears that election mail could be delayed. In May of 2022, we reached a settlement with USPS, which entails monitoring election-related mail procedures and hopefully ensuring timely delivery of election mail. In addition, we have championed voting rights in courts across the country, including up to the Supreme Court. We've joined amicus briefs to support the enfranchisement of those with criminal records. We've supported mechanisms to make voting more accessible through vote by mail and early voting, and we've supported upholding Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And finally, with respect to voting rights, our office does work surrounding protecting voters from intimidation. And this includes issuing law enforcement bulletins, which I will speak of right now. In February of 2024, the DOJ issued guidance to law enforcement agencies imploring that they remain vigilant against actions that could discourage or influence a voter's decision and undermine the integrity of the electoral process. This law enforcement bulletin provides an overview of laws prohibiting election interference and intimidation, voter intimidation and dissuasion, and electioneering within 100 feet of a curbside voting area or election location. It also describes common examples of voter intimidation, including threats of criminal action against voters and presenting false information about the voting process or eligibility requirements. At the end of this presentation, we will provide a link where you can submit complaints regarding discrimination or issues such as voter intimidation that our office does consider. And we also note that if you do experience voter intimidation, we recommend that you first, though, reach out to local law enforcement as well as the Secretary of State's office. So with that, I will hand it over to Deputy Attorney General Dalen Thrift-Viveros, who will cover the remaining subject matter areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marissa. So again, my name is Dalen Thrift-Viveros. I'm a Deputy Attorney General and a Racial Justice Bureau liaison in the Los Angeles office. To talk about the DOJ's role with respect to hate crimes complaints, generally the DOJ does not investigate individual hate crimes complaints or events. However, the DOJ provides technical support to local authorities who should be seen as the first point of contact for a victim who wishes to file a complaint. For individual complaints against agencies regarding hate crimes or a failure to investigate a hate crime for a discriminatory reason, we encourage the public to file complaints with the California Civil Rights Department. So what do we do about hate crimes? As I mentioned, we collect statewide hate crimes data from local law enforcement agencies and issue a report assessing the number of hate crime events, hate crime offenses, hate crime victims, and hate crime suspects. For example, this year's report on 2023 hate crimes data found that hate crime events overall in California decreased, including the number of victims also decreased. However, hate crime events involving religious bias and sexual orientation bias did increase year over year. This data is available on the DOJ website and is also available on the DOJ's Open Justice website, which can provide for more in-depth data analysis. In addition to technical support, DOJ also provides law enforcement and the public guidance regarding hate crimes. For instance, the DOJ has issued legal alerts and bulletins to law enforcement and the California public. On June 26, 2023, the DOJ issued an updated law enforcement bulletin on California laws that prohibit hate crimes or provide for enhanced penalties for specified hate-related acts. The bulletin lays out the elements of a hate crime under the law and the penalty enhancements that are provided under California law. The DOJ has also issued alerts regarding the rights of Muslim, Arab, and Jewish people to be free from violence and hate crimes. We issued that in October 2023. This guidance offers resources such as the Hate Crime Rapid Response Protocol to support local law enforcement in addressing potential attacks on religious institutions, community centers, and other vulnerable locations. Additionally, the DOJ has issued law enforcement bulletins and alerts informing law enforcement agencies and the California public of the free speech rights of college and university students and the rights of the public in general, as including the right to be free from discrimination and harassment. So in October 2023, the DOJ issued a law enforcement bulletin to California state and local law enforcement agencies regarding the legal rights of the public to protest, march, demonstrate, rally, and gather under the California United States Constitution. The legal alert urged law enforcement agencies to adhere to these laws and their policies and practices. On November 9th, 2023, the DOJ issued a legal alert providing guidance to colleges and universities regarding students' rights to free speech, their right to be free from discrimination and harassment based on protected characteristics. These legal alerts aim to balance free speech rights as well as anti-discrimination protections under state and federal laws. Additionally, in September 2020, the California legislature and the California governor signed AB 3121, which established a task force to study and address remedies for African Americans related to California's role in accommodating and facilitating slavery. This task force was composed of academics, politicians, and lawyers. It was the first of its kind in the country of a statewide task force. The DOJ was tasked with providing technical and legal support to the task force, and the DOJ drafted and released a comprehensive report in 2023 detailing the history of discrimination against African Americans in California and in the United States, and proposing remedies including compensation, rehabilitation, and other forms of policy restitution to African Americans and descendants of enslaved people in California. This report is available on the RJB website. There's a link, or on the DOJ website in general. So some of the key findings include that the US, federal, state, and local governments infuse white supremacy into laws to maintain a racial hierarchy in the distribution of wealth, systems of labor and education, and in the criminal justice system. And in California, governments created racial segregation where none previously existed through housing laws and policies, including zoning laws and discriminatory enrollment policies in schools. Federal, state, and local governments also failed to protect African Americans from violence and economic exploitation. And the criminalization of African Americans has led to dramatic racial disparities in policing and incarceration rates. Collectively, these laws and practices cause African Americans to suffer emotional, physical, and economic harms that still continue. And in the report, we propose, or the DOJ and the task force created a series of proposals to address some of these harms. And that's it for the substantive presentation. You can contact us at our email address, rjb@doj.ca.gov, or you can go to our website, oag.ca.gov/RJB, and you can use our online complaint form there. If you have a tip or if you have something that you want to share with us. Anyone can file a tip or complaint. We generally, as we've mentioned a few times, don't investigate individual complaints, but we will look into systemic issues or problems. And that could mean an issue impacting a community of color, an immigrant community, or Native people. And we ask that in as much detail as possible, you describe the potentially unlawful activity, the identity of the entity that is engaged in this activity, and any contact information for us to follow up. And you do not need to include legal analysis, just mainly what the issue or problem that you've identified. So if it's an individual matter, we suggest that you submit a complaint with the California Civil Rights Department, and they are tasked with investigating and following up in that regard. So again, the DOJ does not represent individuals or provide legal advice, and we also do not provide updates about the status of an investigation or litigation. Great, thank you. And I'll pass over to Efrain for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Racial Justice Bureau, Joel, Marissa, and Dalen, for the very informative presentation. I'd like to now open it up for questions. So at this time, our presenters will be going through the questions received through the registration and the Q&A box to answer some of them. If you haven't already, please send your questions in the Q&A box on your screen so that we can collect and try our best to answer them. If you have a question for a specific presenter, please specify that in your question. And lastly, if you're joining us today as a reporter or affiliated with press, please direct your questions to agpressoffice@doj.ca.gov. With that, I'll hand it back over to RJB to facilitate Q&A.
Thank you, Efrain. So we have a few questions that came in from registrants as well as the Q&A. I'm going to pose them to our wonderful team here. So one question that we got here is, what resources are there for hate crimes that occur on a community level, specifically hate crimes against people of color? If you're a victim of a hate crime or have witnessed a hate crime, we encourage you to contact your local law enforcement agency and report that. If you believe that your local law enforcement agency isn't investigating that hate crime, say for a reason based on bias or discrimination, you can certainly file a complaint with the California Civil Rights Department. You can also file a complaint with our office, but as mentioned earlier, the focus of our investigations generally is systemic. It's more on the pattern practice level. We generally don't investigate individual incidents. What we do is we look at a string of incidents to determine if there is a pattern of a violation of law. The question here, I'm going to pose this one to you, Marissa. How does our office address voter intimidation in minority communities?
Thanks, Joelle, and thanks to whoever asked that question. As I noted during my presentation, our office has issued numerous law enforcement bulletins, typically in advance of the election, that will alert law enforcement agencies of their duties to protect voters from intimidation surrounding voting. But in addition to that, again, we do invite you to, if you have concerns regarding voter intimidation or you've experienced it, and particularly if you've already reached out to your local law enforcement who can more immediately assess the situation, we invite you to reach out to us through the links through the complaint form. In the past, our office has worked along with our Division of Law Enforcement, which is another component of the DOJ. We've worked alongside with local law enforcement and the Secretary of State's office to resolve voter intimidation issues or other issues that may pop up around the election. So it is something that we remain very vigilant on, that we are very committed to preventing. And we do certainly invite, if you have any, particular concerns, to reach out to us as well as your local law enforcement.
Thank you, Marissa.
Joelle, I will ask, oh, go ahead.
I'm just going to tick these off. A few questions about RIPA. So when is the report going to be issued? It will be issued January 1, 2025. And another question about RIPA, whether officers are required to report their race in RIPA reporting, and the answer is yes, that is required under the regulations. You want to take another question, Marissa?
Yes, and I will direct this one to Daylin, and this is a question we received via registration, which is, what is the status of the state's study on reparations?
So thank you for the question. Our study was released last year. It's available on the DOJ website. You can just search California DOJ reparations report and it should show up. But in terms of policies and legislation, so in this legislative session, the California Black Legislative Caucus introduced 14 priority bills, is how they termed it, for reparations to get the ball rolling. And 2 have been passed so far and enacted into law. One will appear on the November ballot as Proposition 6, which would amend the California Constitution to end forced labor in state prisons by prohibiting the California Department of Corrections from disciplining an incarcerated person for refusing to work. The other enacted bill is AB 1929, which requires the state to gather and maintain data on recipients of STEM grants and existing workforce development programs, with an eye towards identifying racial and socioeconomic disparities in the issuance of these grants. There are also 7 other bills that were passed by both chambers and are on the governor's desk right now. He has until September 30th to decide on whether to sign those bills into law or not. And that's the current status. I just checked this morning, and there's 7 bills currently on his desk.
Thank you, Dalen. I think we're at time, Efrain. Do we still have time for more Q&A?
Yeah, we have some time for more Q&A if there's still some questions available.
Great. So one other question, and maybe Marissa, you could field this one. This is a question regarding a local jurisdiction that may be discriminating against individuals on the basis of race and disability status. How would, if someone wishes to file a complaint about that, what's your advice?
My advice would be that they can certainly always file a complaint with our office. Again, I will continue to promote our complaint line regarding that. And you can also file a complaint if you individually have experienced this with the Civil Rights Department, which is another state agency that we collaborate with. And as many facts as you can provide in your complaint, both to us and to them, the better. And so I would say, certainly feel free to reach out, and also don't be afraid to reach out. If you're not sure who the complaint can go to, we're here to help you, and, we'll direct your complaint the right way, even if it might be something that is, better suited for CRD or, with respect to voting things, the Secretary of State's office. And actually on that note, I wanted to address one thing that was raised in the Q&A regarding potential misinformation about folks who have criminal convictions and their ability to vote, and that information being disseminated. To the individual who alerted this in the Q&A, I think it would be extremely helpful if you could submit a complaint to our office as well as to the Secretary of State's office, specifying the area in which you're seeing this, and any further details that you have.
Thank you, Marissa. And we have a few more questions generally about bias in police encounters, questions about pretext stops. If folks are witnessing or experiencing discriminatory encounters with police officers, or bias, or witnessing bias in police encounters, of course, you're more than welcome to file a complaint with our office. Those complaints will be routed to the Civil Rights Enforcement section, but they can also be reviewed by the Police Practices section. You can also file a complaint with the California Civil Rights Department. And if your local jurisdiction has some type of oversight body, you can also file a complaint with them as well.
I will, I see a question here regarding campus free speech and the right to not be discriminated or harassed on campus. For those related questions, I would direct you to the guidance that we issued in November 2023. And that guidance, as Dalen had described, discusses on-campus free speech rights, and it also discusses anti-discrimination protections that occur on campus. If you have any concerns regarding discrimination on campus or believe that there is a hostile and discriminatory environment, again, I would direct you to our complaint form, but I would also direct you to the U.S. Department of Education, who regularly investigates those types of on-campus activities, or, whether or not there is a hostile environment, a hostile discriminatory environment.
I believe we're also going to provide folks a list of resources, and that list of resources will include the law enforcement bulletin and the legal alert that, the legal alert that Marissa just mentioned.
You all see any other questions that you guys would like to answer before we close off?
Any you'd like to answer, Marissa?
I am not, none in particular. I would just say again, certainly encourage folks in the community to reach out to us, give us, alert us to what is going on, or if you have concerns, utilize that complaint function.
Sounds good. Well, thank you all for the Q&A. Thank you all for the presentation. We really appreciate it. And to all our attendees, I want to say thank you all for joining us today for our Demystifying the DOJ presentation on the Racial Justice Bureau. We hope that this presentation was informative and useful to you. Please keep in contact with us. You can always reach out to us through email by emailing the address provided by Lauda in the chat. These resources and links mentioned in the presentation are available on our website, and the recording of this presentation will also be available there shortly for you to rewatch. If you are interested in watching any of our previous presentations in which we have covered housing, workers' rights, children's justice, and more, you can also find those recordings on our website. I'd also like to announce a couple of our upcoming events. The first one I want to announce, please join our upcoming CARE community briefing on knowing your voting rights, which is happening October 2nd from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. Here, we're going to have state and community leaders provide an in-depth look at important voting information, such as the California Voter Bill of Rights and more. You're going to hear from California Attorney General's office and community-based organizations dedicated to protecting voting rights for historically marginalized communities. The link to register will be in the chat. Also, please join our upcoming CARE community briefing on the recently released report from DOJ's Office of Gun Violence Prevention on protection orders to prevent gun violence. Experts from DOJ and external partners will provide an in-depth look at California's uniquely broad array of 9-court protection order processes and discuss how to best utilize them to support impacted communities in our current legal context. The briefing will take place on October 10th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. You can also find the registration information at the link provided by Lauda in the chat. And lastly, please join our Q4 Demystifying the DOJ presentation, which is scheduled for December 11th at 10 a.m. Here, we're going to go over our Office of Community Awareness Response and Engagement, also known as CARE, and registration for that event will also be in the chat. So those are the announcements that we wanted to share with you all. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Take care and have a great rest of your day.